Here we are again at Friday Conversations here on the Riverside. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm doing great. How are you?
Man, it is Friday. We had another big snowstorm here, and then it's all melted. It's weird. It's almost like Oklahoma because we had like 5, 7 inches, like shut everything down, and now it's going to be 50 degrees and all the snow is going to be melted.
Yeah,
So it's crazy.
it's a beautiful day here.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
It's nice and sunny here. I love the snow. Okay, listen, we like to jump right into things and not piddle diddle around with our conversation. So this week, I was having a conversation with my daughter this morning, and we were talking about meaningful work and
Yeah.
what makes work matter, what makes work not matter, what work is meaningful and what work is not. And
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't know if like you have had how you've experienced I because I feel like I've been very fortunate most of my life, and I think a lot of it has to do with attitude and perspective. But like you've let me ask you, have you worked in jobs that you were like, this so aligns with my values and my purpose? And then you've had other responsibilities that you were like, this doesn't have anything to do with my values and purpose, and yet I'm doing it. And in both of those, like one, it feels like really natural, like I'm working on purpose, and the other one is like, um, I'm not working on purpose. How have you
Mm-hmm.
some thoughts about how you find meaning, how you make things meaningful, or if you're just like, okay, the meaning is not in the work, it's in that this work is providing for my family, and that's the meaning
Yeah.
of it. What are some of your perspectives on that? Because it's so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the two things come to mind. One is that it kind of like, what is that saying? Like you're only like 2 degrees away from Kevin Bacon. That is
Six
it.
degrees, six
Or
degrees of Kevin Bacon.
what is
Yeah,
that? I can't
6 degrees.
remember. 6 degrees. It's kind of like
You
that.
might only be 2 degrees.
But it's kind of like that when you think about like your purpose and like having meaning in your job. Like you may only be like 1 degree from that meaning, and I do believe that that
Hmm.
meaning comes from the people on the other side of what you're doing, like who you're serving.
Are
Um,
you talking like your supervisors, like the organization, or are you talking about the client and user
the
customer?
client, the
Okay.
client. Because one of the things I get to do when I talk about, values and talk about aligning our values, our personal values with our organization, however we can, because it does create that sense of meeting. And, sometimes, I was with a electric company, and we were talking about this same topic, and some of them have office jobs. There's a lot of field men and
Mm-hmm.
women, and for them it didn't take long, but they did need reminding when I kind of prodded and like asked some questions. It was like, no, what gives me meaning is knowing the people we're serving at the end of the day. So they might not interact with them ever, even,
Right.
but what gives them meaning on their job is to think of that. So that's one thing, to recognize, that element of service, because we're all human, and that gives us meaning to serve
Yeah.
each other.
To serve each other. That's
Um,
interesting. Can I ask
but
you a question? Or
yeah,
do you want to keep going? Do you want to keep going on that
you
thought?
can
I don't want to
I'll
interrupt your
pause.
thought.
I'll come back to the second thing.
Okay. So, how whether it's with those folks or in yourself, how important is it for them to already have kind of defined what their purpose is? One of the experiences I think people have is like they feel like this job's not meaningful, but they themselves haven't said, I recognize I have a sense of my purpose, like what I'm doing here, what I'm about. And so that's why I can create this. Here's what I'm about, and here's what I'm doing. And they seem at odds. I think a lot of people haven't really done this work to go have a real clarity about it. And so when they have a sense of this doesn't really do it, or it does do it, like, but they don't have any like internal attachment or internal alignment.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. When it comes to like the values in particular, and like somebody knowing what their personal values are, I do think that brings exponential fulfillment when you recognize that, because you're able to lean into it, um, so to speak. But I actually think that finding meaning on the job can be even much simpler than that. Like, not everybody has to feel like I got to define my three high values. I mean, even though like I'm all for that and I love helping people do it,
Yeah.
um, but I don't necessarily think that's what's needed in order to have fulfillment. I think that many people, maybe they're not like as feeler as I am, but they're
Mhm.
good just to know that I'm helping people. I'm serving people. At the end of the day, the papers I push, the service I do, the work I do, it's helping someone at the end of the day. And I think just remembering that, like being aware of that, can really help people. Um, Maybe not feel like they're changing the world, but
Yeah.
that's not really what we need. We need to feel like we're serving humanity
That's
well.
interesting. Okay, so the whole premise for you then is if I can be of service. That's
Yeah.
kind of what it is. If I can say I'm serving, and some people, like you say, in many jobs aren't the last step before the customer or the client,
Right.
or they don't have any contact with
Right.
it. They're several layers back, and yet going, I know this trickle down effect impacts people, and how do you feel about this? Because I'm a big proponent of if I'm serving my colleagues, if I have a sense of I'm empowering, supporting, being a strength or a source to the people I'm working with, you know, that in itself has a sense of fulfillment because I think
Mhm.
it falls in that same line that you're speaking of. Is like I'm serving these people who maybe not be. I guess it's the stakeholder idea. Like who are the different stakeholders at what point?
Mhm.
Obviously, the customer client at the end is the ultimate stakeholder, but there are
Mhm.
many kind of along the way, and so um, that's an interesting that service is the premise for meaningfulness. And if I can identify, if I can be content, I mean, sometimes maybe it's not even identify. It's like I know who I'm being of service to. I don't know
Yeah.
if I'm content or satisfied that that's enough to say this is meaningful.
Right. Right. And that's when I think our values come in, because if you're not fulfilled, I do believe there's something that's misaligned. Um, and so, and it could be just your perspective that's misaligned. Couldn't be what you're actually doing.
Right.
So,
And I think that's the risk a lot of times for the people we're talking to is that idea of like this job doesn't have meaning and so I'm going to go find
mhm,
another job that has meaning, or that idea of I feel misaligned
mhm,
but I'm not even really sure with what, but I know it's not fulfilling. And I mean, I'm a big believer of like you don't have to change the environment around you if you change the way you think, change the way you engage in it, change the way you consider what it is. So it's that even that idea if somebody's gone, my job just doesn't have meaning, and yet if they go, but if you're of service, could that be
mhm,
what actually is the most meaningful, which
mhm,
doesn't change anything except the way we think and see and just a shift of our thoughts that are like,
mhm.
huh, I wonder if I could be a more satisfied human being if I thought about this different.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why service is like the word service is a named value in like most organizations
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something like it. It's because it's good. Not only does it help the people on, at the end of the day, but it also helps the person who's, providing the service. So,
yeah. So, but it's interesting because customer service. There are a lot of customer service jobs that are really difficult.
they
That are
are.
like these are hard because we're dealing with so many things, and yet the
Yeah.
idea is, gosh, your industry is kind of the epitome of meaningful work.
Yeah. I ask people often, like, what about your job gives you fulfillment and meaning? And every time, I kid you not, like, I'm giving it away here because I do ask this a lot, but I
Mhm.
kid you not, every single time people say the people. It's the people they work with, it's the people they serve, it's their team, it's
Yeah.
their, maybe they have, a deeper, high regard for their executives or something. Like, it's the people. And then I'm like, the next question is, so what's your biggest challenge when it comes to your work? And they're like, the people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like the age old conflict. It's
Yeah.
like, it's
Yeah.
really hard to work with people.
That's really funny. Yeah,
Hmm.
that is pretty classic. I think that has been I mean, if Gallup did surveys on that specific question, that's the answer you're going to get.
Yeah.
So I think it's really an interesting dynamic because there's so much friction that people cause at work, and there's so much fulfillment that people cause at work,
Uh-huh.
and those same and understanding how to do that. And that's why, honestly, what we talk about, just when we're talking here, I'm like, this is why the culture of an organization matters so much, because it's the environment that all of the people exist in together. And if they can have some sort of unwritten or unwritten like guide and code, and like this is how we treat people respectfully, and how we deal with conflict, and how we
Mhm.
have difficult conversations, and how we're willing to be open and transparent. Like if we can set up those parameters, it's almost like culture is a boundary shaping work guide. Like
Mhm.
if this is how we do life together at work, and when we can put language to it that helps us all have an agreement around it, or we show up knowing this is the expectation we have of people,
Yeah.
it really gives us kind of the freedom then to trust that the service we're providing, that like it really does matter. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful for the work we get to do,
Yeah.
especially when we describe it in these terms.
Yeah. I mean, I've certainly had jobs where it was really hard to find meaning.
Mhm.
Um, those manual labor jobs in particular, it's hard. I mean, it's physically taxing, mentally taxing, and um, it's hard to stay motivated. But I'm not going to lie, there are seasons in my life where it's like what gets me through is knowing I'm providing for my kids, you
Absolutely.
know,
Right.
and I'm doing what I need to do, and I'm doing it well for that reason, for those
Yeah.
people, those two
Yeah.
little munchkins. And so
And that's a pretty good, that's enough, right? It's, I mean, it's not
yeah,
enough, but it's like, boy, it is enough to motivate and go,
it
okay.
is
Yeah.
absolutely enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Good. Okay. Well, this has been a great little conversation. I'm glad we could make meaningful work on this Friday. So thank you very
yes.
much. Have yourself a fabulous weekend.
Have a great Friday. Bye.
Bye. Okay. That's stopping. Yeah, that'll go somewhere. It'll produce something.